Greetings. My name is Belimar Ramos Rosario. I am a doctoral student of the Inter-American University Ponce campus. Today I will be presenting the topic Quantitative Experimental Design, specifically expository factorial design and causal comparative research. Why use quantitative experimental designs? Neil Armstrong once said research is creating new knowledge. It's in the pursuit of knowledge what has driven civilizations to the future for hundreds of years. Objectives: to analyze the quantitative experimental design, focusing on the factorial design by discussing the characteristics of the design and the important proponents, uses, process, advantages, and disadvantages when applied. The skills an investigator should possess to effectively apply this design. Why experiment? According to Fernandez and Batista, 2010, we experiment to look for relationship between variables, to optimize products or process development, and to achieve quality performance. The definition of experimental design proposes to test the influence an idea, practice, or procedure may have on an outcome. Part of the process of experimental design is choosing how to run an experiment according to the variable and data the researcher wants to collect. Experimental design is used to establish cause and effect between variables. The cause would be the independent variable and the effect the dependent variable. This type of study controls all factors to achieve a better or topic-specific outcomes. Let's look at the pictures for an example. If people contaminate the air with carbon monoxide, heat and particles will fill the air, causing extreme weather. Also, air pollution. At the same time, it will cause breathing disorders in different people. We have multiple outcomes. On the other hand, if people recycle and accomplish an eco-friendly living, the environment will improve, resulting in healthier individuals and cleaner air. These two examples show us the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Some characteristics of the design include random assignment. Random assignment includes the creation of random groups where every subject has equal opportunity of participating. This is done to avoid bias against the participants or the sample. However, it is not the same as random selection of a sample to represent a population. The random assignment is within the experiment. The random selection is with the whole of the population. Control over variables is basically the requirement to intervene during the investigation process in terms of treatment, stimulus, or influence over a variable. We also have manipulation of conditions, states that once the sample is selected, it is randomly assigned to either a condition or experimental group. Therefore, the variable always has a purpose. Outcome measures. After the application of the experiment conditions are assessed, it is needed to evaluate the cause and the effect. We also have group comparisons. It is the process of obtaining results of the dependent variables to compare between groups of individuals. And finally, prioritize validity. Determines causal relationships between variables with appropriate group statistics. In other words, all the evidence that is gathered to prove the outcome needs to be valid and prioritized. Casual comparative research. This type of research involves comparing the outcomes of two or more groups that differ in some of these characteristics. It is normally used for educational research. This type of study doesn't include manipulation of the variables. It studies the statistics differences when comparing dependent variables. The disadvantage of this design is that probable cause cannot be established, only associations between variables. Why can we not establish probable cause? Because you don't have a control group. For example, an investigator compares high school dropout rate between students who were held back a grade or two and students who were not held back. After analyzing the results, the investigator associates the outcomes with the causes established in the beginning of the process. This may explain the relationship between the two or what they have in common. Factorial designs are the type of experiment where more than one independent variable is manipulated to influence the outcome. However, the dependent variable is measured only once. This type of experiment uses random assignment of samples, two or more groups or interventions during the study, which facilitates testing for several hypotheses. The purpose of this study is to observe the treatment effect on the outcome. Different variables may apply to create a believable environment for research. Here lies the usefulness of this type of study. Now, for example, imagine we want to explore the relationship between relaxation and the time one spends at a pool. Most likely, the results would include that the more time you spend at a pool, the more relaxed you feel. However, different variables should be considered, such as abrupt weather conditions, or the amount of people using the pool at the time, or even unexpected sound disturbances. Therefore, in factorial studies, the different hypotheses should include the variables to obtain a more specific outcome, depending on the conditions included. Every experiment has a process, and experimental design is no different. First, the researcher should determine if the experiment is appropriate according to the research problem. Then choose the activities to be used to evaluate cause and effect, creating a hypothesis to test. After that, assign the individuals or samples. This sample will be treated with the activities chosen according to the experiment design. Then the investigator conducts the experiment, observing and evaluating results to analyze the data. Finally, the experimental report should be completed. The major proponents of experimental design, according to Creswell, include Michael Schuler. In 1903, he worked with control groups in psychological experiments. William McCall in 1916 applied random assignment of samples, and then in 1925 established the comparison of groups as a procedure. Ronald Fisher in 1936 included statistical procedures to experimental research in psychology and agriculture. Campbell and Stanley in 1963 identified 15 main types of experimental designs. Campbell and Cook in 1979 added the importance of threats validity to the designs. Finally, in 2002, Campbell, Cook, and Shadish refined the major experimental design characteristics according to the potential threats and the statistical procedures. As you can see, experimental design has been around for a while, and it has been developed throughout the years to include more features, making it more valid. Advantages and disadvantages of experimental design. Some of the advantages include that most of the experimental designs establish cause and effect. They also explain causal relationships between variables. They tend to have a greater degree of purity in observation and results, creating the necessary conditions for the experiment. Some of the disadvantages include that the results sometimes cannot be replicated. It is difficult to replicate each environmental feature or each control that you have on an experiment. Some experiments are not possible to conduct because they may harm humans, so they are not feasible according to law. Some variables cannot be measured using an instrument that you can create. In some experiments, control is also impossible. And finally, cooperation from individuals is sometimes difficult to obtain. Many individuals still have difficulties or feel afraid of participating in an experiment. Investigators need a set of skills to be able to conduct research. Some of the skills that they need include analytical mindset, to be able to employ multiple variables, compare results, and use different units of analysis. An investigator should be ethical, understanding and avoiding potential ethical issues that could invalidate the study, such as using humans as guinea pigs or using minors for studies that they should not be used for. The investigator should also be have problem-solving skills and be goal-oriented, exerting caution regarding the investigation and the results. During the investigation, many problems may occur, and the investigator needs to be able to deal with those problems and solve them to continue the investigation. And the investigator should also be able to control his or her emotions. Patience to deal with the issues that may rise during the investigation is something that every investigator should have. The key elements to remember about experimental design is that you must remember to use the 6 features of experimental design: random assignment, control over variables, manipulation of conditions, outcome measures, group comparisons, and validity. Clarify the dependent variable or outcome. Identify the threats to validity according to the design, and follow the process established to complete the experimental design. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this presentation can be of use.